nothing is sacred for Boko Haram, not even the mosque. 44 worshippers are shot dead in northern Nigeria. The gunmen are thought to have been looking for civilian vigilantes. We have the latest on Nigeria's wildest and deadliest region.
Also on today's programme, another murder at the Marikana mine in South Africa. The killing comes as the country prepares for the anniversary of its worst post-apartheid massacre. Just days before he's due back in court, Oscar Pistorius is snapped kayaking with a friend. His uncle says he needs a break. And he thought he'd never play again. But 1 year on since a liver transplant, the French footballer Eric Abidal gets a call-up to the national team. There's news today of one of Boko Haram's more desperate and ruthless attacks on Eid worshippers at a mosque in northern Nigeria. They were thought to have been looking for civilian vigilantes who have sprung up across the lawless region to fight against the Islamic terror group. Now, 3 states are already under emergency powers and thousands of troops have been drafted into the region. So far, there's little sign of a breakthrough. Charles was there very recently.
Well, it's been another bloody weekend in northern Nigeria. Suspected Boko Haram militants killed up to 60 people in towns around Maiduguri, the capital of Borno State. The deadliest attack was at a mosque in Konduga, where 44 people were shot during dawn prayers on Sunday. News of the killings has only just emerged as communications are disrupted by the state of emergency. And a new video from Boko Haram's leader Abubakar Shekau has also emerged, claiming to have been behind recent attacks and saying the insurgents are winning the war against the Nigerian military. You soldiers have claimed that you're powerful, that we have been defeated, that we are mad people. But how can a madman successfully coordinate recent attacks in Gamboru, in Malumfatori, slaughter people in Biu, kill in Gwoza and in Bama, where soldiers fled under our heavy firepower? We've killed countless soldiers and we're going to kill more. Our strength and firepower has surpassed that of Nigeria. This latest attack is a stark reminder that Muslim or Christian, young or old, no one is safe from Boko Haram's 4-year-old insurgency. 44 worshippers were gunned down as they prayed. Dozens more were seriously injured and taken to hospital in Maiduguri. Boko Haram has not claimed responsibility for this attack, but it fits the pattern of previous killings where suspected informants and members of vigilante groups have been targeted. Residents of Maiduguri, a Boko Haram stronghold, find themselves in an impossible position. Many do not trust the military's claims that they're winning the war against the insurgents, but those who have taken their security into their own hands by forming vigilante groups are ruthlessly pursued by Boko Haram. Whole communities still bear the scars of their encounters with the insurgents. 41 students and 1 teacher were killed last month at this school in the small farming village of Mamudo. A survivor points out where 2 students were shot dead in their sleep. He says 1 was killed on the bed and 1 on the floor. Meanwhile, the Nigerian military insist they're making progress in the fight against Boko Haram. But 3 months after President Goodluck Jonathan declared a state of emergency in 3 northern states, hundreds have been killed in insurgent attacks, and an end to the conflict seems as distant as ever. Well, I'm joined now via Skype by Dr. Jonathan Hill, who's a senior lecturer at the Defence Studies Department at King's College in London. Dr. Hill, thanks very much indeed for talking to us. It's a bit unusual, though not uncommon, for gunmen to target mosques, especially Boko Haram. Is it conceivable that they believed there were anti-insurgency vigilantes there, as is being rumoured?
That seems to be the case, yes, as to one of the reasons why the group carried out this attack, that it is targeted mosque. This mosque does represent a new development in its armed campaign. It has attacked Muslims in the past, especially those engaged in what it considers to be unpious or irreligious activities such as drinking and gambling, and it's also attacked Muslim religious leaders, especially those that have been critical of it. But it hasn't waged this kind of assault against a mosque before.
And of course, on that vigilante issue, we understand that lots of people in Borno State are taking the law into their hands and forming vigilante groups because they don't believe the government can protect them.
That's right, which is very concerning for the international community. The implications that this has for the state of security in Nigeria, that the police and the armed forces aren't able to adequately protect Nigerian citizens. But it's not without precedent in other parts of the Islamic world. In Algeria in the 1990s, the same sort of groups and organizations were set up to provide local security for people living in isolated towns and cities.
So is it your considered sense, then, that Nigeria's climate of insecurity seems to be getting worse and not better?
Yes, I think that is definitely the sense. In addition to this attack, the recent declaration of a state of emergency in 3 states in the north by President Goodluck Jonathan was a significant and worrying development. In making it, he not only essentially was admitting that his government doesn't exercise total control over the whole of the country, which is a definition of state failure, but he was also acknowledging that the scale of the threat posed by Boko Haram was more serious than certain senior politicians and security figures had said in the past.
So even though the army is still claiming success, is it now even more unclear about which direction the battle against the insurgents is going? In other words, are the army losing the war?
The army is winning the battles, but quite possibly losing the war. So undoubtedly, when the armed forces engage Boko Haram fighters, they often achieve success. They kill Boko Haram fighters, they manage to retake areas that the group controlled. Yet, that doesn't mean necessarily that the group is becoming significantly weaker. And in addition, the armed forces' actions are helping to sustain Boko Haram itself. The abuses carried out by the armed forces are enabling Boko Haram to continue to recruit new fighters to its rank and also new supporters as well. So even though the armed forces and security forces might achieve certain short-term successes, the longer-term aim of containing and essentially diminishing and destroying the group, I don't think that's being achieved necessarily. I think that the armed forces are actually helping perpetuate Boko Haram in some ways.
Okay, Dr. Jonathan Hill, we appreciate your thoughts there. Thanks very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
In other news, police in South Africa have confirmed that a female employee at the Marikana mine was fatally shot near the facility yesterday. Now, her death comes just days before the anniversary of the killing of more than 30 striking miners by security forces last year. Arise News' Adrian Smith reports.
Tensions are running high in Marikana after news of another killing spread across the community. This time the victim was a woman, an off-duty worker at Lonmin's platinum mine. Local police say she was gunned down during daylight yesterday and have cordoned off the area around the scene of the crime. While the motive is still unknown, many believe the murder was just the latest fallout of the violent rivalry between the two leading unions, the NUM and the AMCU. The NUM says the woman was one of its officials and has called on the AMCU to stop terrorising its members.
Our hope is that the situation is going to normalise and people going to be allowed to belong to the union of their own choices, right? Because it's the freedom of their association, okay, that these people are fighting against. All right, don't allow people to belong to the union of their choices. It's a serious problem to us.
The bloody battle between the two unions has claimed dozens of lives in recent months and shows no sign of letting up. Monday's shooting also comes as the first anniversary of the Marikana clashes approaches. On August the 16th last year, 34 striking miners were killed when police opened fire on them in the country's deadliest security incident since the end of apartheid. Adrian Smith, Arise News.
Well, our reporter Shahan Ramkissoon joins us now. Shahan, is there any indication that this latest death was an assassination?
Well, that's what it points to, Heather. What we're seeing here is that this woman was one of the first people who actually went to a rival union and tried to win over members back to the NUM, which was originally the controlling union at the Marikana mine. And now she's dead. So it looked as if there was a hit on her. Of course, both unions, the AMCU and the NUM, are denying any involvement, saying that it's pure criminality, and they had nothing to do with it.
Now, this is just the latest in a series of killings, isn't it, since the Marikana massacre last year?
Yeah, definitely. There have been at least several killings between, both these unions involved in this Lonmin mine. It's quite worrying to a number of people, especially police, who don't seem to have a control over the situation. Police did go into Marikana today and they found handmade weapons at many hostels in the area which were confiscated. And of course, these are the weapons which are made to commit these crimes, because it's really difficult to get weapons through into the mine itself because there are scanners in place. So it really does point to this being a rivalry since the Marikana incident occurred, and both mines fighting over who can gain control of Lonmin mine.
It seems as though, as we approach the anniversary on the 16th, the one-year anniversary, that actually what happened, which was probably the worst example of police brutality since the days of apartheid. Have any police been charged with anything yet?
No, not as yet. The Marikana Commission is still ongoing. It's been, coming close to a year now that the commission is currently in place. You know that Jacob Zuma established this commission to try to get answers as to whether or not police used force without a good reason. And it's just been dragging on and on. There have been many delays to the commission to try to figure out whether this was the case. And there are no answers still, and no police officers have been charged. Really it's government and the police themselves relying heavily on the Marikana Commission to try to get answers so that they can go ahead with prosecution if there is a need.
And what of the witnesses? How are they holding up?
Well, some of the witnesses have been killed. That's the reality here. Some of the witnesses are from either mining unions, who have been killed over the years. Some key witnesses actually have been murdered here, and there's still no arrest with regards to their, murders at all. Many of them have come forward, though, those who are alive, and given their side to the story. Police officers maintain that they were forced to use weapons in this to try to disperse the crowd. They claim that the miners who were striking used force on them first, and they retaliated. Of course, that's not the case of the witnesses. Many of them saying that police used unwarranted force and that they were heavy-handed when approaching miners on that day when at least 34 people were killed.
OK. Shahan, for the moment, thank you very much. Now, staying with South Africa, and Oscar Pistorius has reportedly been seen kayaking in the Western Cape, but it comes just days before the Paralympic runner is due to appear in court, and he's accused of shooting his model girlfriend Reeva Steenkamp to death earlier this year. Jerome Evans reports.
In yet another twist to the Valentine's murder that's gripped the world, Oscar Pistorius, the Blade Runner, will appear in a South African court next week. The date, the 19th of August, would have been Steenkamp's 30th birthday. On Sunday, Pistorius was reportedly seen kayaking with friends in the Western Cape. It's one of just a few times the athlete has been seen in public since he shot dead Reeva Steenkamp at his exclusive home in Pretoria on February the 14th, in what he called a horrible accident. Prosecutors have charged the 26-year-old with premeditated murder. At next week's hearing, the Olympic runner will learn what evidence the prosecution has against him. It will give Pistorius and his legal team time to prepare their defence ahead of the trial, which is likely to take place in early 2014. Speaking here in June, Pistorius' uncle said he's confident that the runner will be prepared to face the courts.
He will definitely be ready. Being the mind that he is, being the man that he is, he will know what it's going to take to do this event. I've got no doubt in my mind that he's not a murderer.
As Pistorius remains notably absent from the World Athletics Championships in Moscow, the sprinter's court appearance next Monday will be his second since he was freed on bail in February. Jerome Evans, Arise News.
Well, Shahan is still with us. Shahan, now he was pictured kayaking in Hermanus, which is a very popular seaside resort. It's not exactly keeping out of the public eye. His uncle says he needs a break. What has been the reaction in South Africa to the pictures of him kayaking?
Well, and the reaction is mixed in South Africa. There are staunch Oscar Pistorius supporters who, even during his bail application, came to court to support him. Now, those are the people who are on social networks really saying that, he's innocent until proven guilty and he can do whatever he wants to relax. But he does have his fair share of critics who have come out to denounce the act itself, saying that he's busy enjoying his life while a family is still coming to terms with the death of their daughter. So people have different views on Oscar Pistorius being in public, seemingly enjoying his life. The newspaper that actually published that picture, was quite, clever to do it at this point. They want to get the reaction from the public. They were flooded with letters from South Africans about what they feel about Oscar Pistorius being out there kayaking. So they really did do what they wanted in terms of getting a reaction on this Oscar Pistorius case, especially ahead of his trial next week, Monday. Or rather, not trial, Heather, I just say his court appearance.
Yes, now that he's due back in court on the 19th. It's a really sad coincidence, isn't it, that date?
Yeah, definitely a coincidence. The legal system in South Africa, of course, it depends on whether the state and defense teams are available. And it so happened that both sides agreed to appear on August 19th, which is, coincidentally, Reeva Steenkamp's 30th, was supposed to be her 30th birthday. This is the second time something like this has actually happened in terms of the court cases. When Oscar Pistorius first applied for bail, that was the same day Reeva Steenkamp was buried. So this is the second time that something like this is going to happen. It was coincidence, though, and nothing else at play there.
So on the 19th, what is the defence team likely to hear that they haven't heard before? Because we thought we'd heard absolutely everything at those bail hearings.
Yeah. Well, this is just basically the chance for the state to, serve the indictment on Oscar Pistorius, which they will do in the next couple of days, and then go to court to formally say these are the charges that we have against you. We do know that he faces premeditated murder. They're also going to give a list of witnesses to the defense team, and, they'll give the defense team a chance to respond and prepare for their case. And what we'll know on Monday is possibly a trial date for this case. And, the NPA is not too sure exactly when that's going to happen. But since they're ready, it now really does depend on the defense team and how much time they require to counter the argument that the state does have.
Shahan Ramkissoon in Johannesburg, thanks very much indeed for joining us.
You're watching Arise News. We have some breaking news coming out of Egypt. There are reports of fresh clashes in Cairo during a march by thousands of pro-Morsi supporters to the Interior Ministry. Local residents began throwing stones and bottles at the supporters of the ousted president, who then threw them back. Women and children were seen fleeing the scene. Police then reportedly fired tear gas at the protesters. The clashes come as the Muslim Brotherhood says it's ready to take part in talks on Egypt's political crisis. We can now go straight to Cairo and join our regular guest, current affairs blogger Erica Aisha Sharves. Erica, thank you very much indeed for talking to us. So the waiting game appears to be over and the clashes have begun. Tell us more about what happened today in Cairo.
Today, the Muslim Brotherhood supporters were marching on various ministries. They were marching on the Ministry of Religion. They were marching on the Ministry of the Interior. And as they were marching through the streets, people began throwing things from balconies and on top of buildings. And that's sort of how they began clashes between pro- and anti-Morsi groups.
Well, all that was earlier. What's happening now on the streets of Cairo?
Well, in various locations, people have come out of their homes, sort of started in these altercations. There was actually another altercation right near my home while your broadcast was beginning. So there's this tension in the air, and people are just waiting to do something. So I think we're seeing this play out a little bit in the streets.
Now, while all this is happening, we understand the Egyptian media are full of vitriolic anti-American rhetoric, and the streets are decorated with posters denouncing President Obama for allegedly supporting the Muslim Brotherhood. Could all that take on a more frightening, xenophobic dimension that could compromise Americans in Egypt, their security?
Well, it's been an ongoing problem that both sides are very angry with the U.S. Last night, we heard during coverage of Rabaa al-Adawiyya, they were shouting against Obama as well. Now, Egyptians generally, like most of what I've seen across the Middle East, draw a line between the American government and Americans. So average people like myself, whom people know are American, they don't have a huge problem with them. In fact, they enjoy American liberties and that sort of thing. But the American government has certainly fallen out of favor with average Egyptians.
And could one explanation for that falling out of favor be that the U.S. has failed to explain itself or engage with the Egyptian people at this time of extreme polarization in Egypt?
Well, we've seen the U.S. government try to come in and talk with people. They were angry before at the current ambassador because Egyptians felt that she was meddling in Egypt's affairs, trying to be on one side or the other. And as more of these U.S. envoys and EU envoys come in, people see that as outsiders trying to control the outcome of Egyptian politics.
So yesterday we had this calm but a sort of party atmosphere, and today we've got protests and attacks. Is this now a turning point? What do you reckon will happen next?
Well, we'll see this play out through the night. If these clashes continue across Cairo and in other cities, then it could go back to Rabaa al-Adawiyya and the Nahda protests, their largest locations that have at least tens of thousands of supporters in them. And that could make the difference. As soon as women and children are threatened in those places, it turns average observers into sort of participants. They choose which side they're on at that time. So we'll see throughout the night what happens.
And, of course, we're hearing that women and children are fleeing the camps where a lot of these pro-Morsi supporters were. I mean, what more can you tell us about that?
Well, during the last few clashes and today, they're reporting that women and children are leaving or being hidden in a local mosque. So that's kind of the first thing that happens, even in street fights here, is that they ask women and children to clear the street. So it's sort of a family-imposed curfew or a family-imposed request on people.
So what about the normal sort of economic business of life? Is it going on in Cairo? Has it been effectively disrupted by all of this?
As soon as Ramadan was over, beginning on Sunday, Monday, and today, people have gone back to their jobs, and at warehouses, they're going back to running their businesses, and things have begun to look the same as they did before, which was still in a really big economic slump. Businesses in every neighborhood are being closed down. You notice that people aren't buying as much. They just aren't up to purchasing things because they want to hold on to their money. They don't know what will happen in the near future.
Erica Aisha Chavez, thanks very much indeed for that update. And just to recap on that breaking story, we're hearing from the Reuters news agency that clashes have broken out in central Cairo, where supporters of ousted President Mohamed Morsi came under attack as they marched to the Interior Ministry. Supporters of the new military-installed government threw stones at the marchers and threw bottles at them from balconies. Police then fired tear gas at the pro-Morsi supporters.
We'd even got reports that a couple of people with machetes went after the protesters as well. These pictures are just from a short time ago, and we'll just have a look at those. And
yeah, you see the man throwing stones there. Clearly, you can also see tear gas. So this is clearly the attack that took place earlier today, and that looks like the current scene in Cairo as of the moment. Yeah, these are actually very recent pictures. They're not actually live, but this was clearly what was happening earlier today when pro-Morsi supporters were marching towards the Interior Ministry and came under attack from anti-Morsi supporters as well as the police.
And you can see that there are very few women and children. In fact, I can't see any women and children, because nobody's ever at all. But women and children have been urged to get out of there because it is just men there. Of
course, this suggests that the clashes have now begun and that this could well degenerate as the hours go by in Cairo.
You can see, actually, these are unedited pictures, but I just saw in that previous shot there was a woman being led away. So obviously they're trying to keep women and children out of what could develop. And you can see there's running.
Absolutely, and we just saw
a
police vehicle there, which was clearly lobbing tear gas at people. We can see people running, presumably running from attack. We can see stones being thrown at them, and presumably also running away from the effects of the tear gas, which is coming from the police vans all around them. We can see police also going around with batons, apparently charging people. And that's the scene in Cairo. That was the scene in Cairo earlier today. As Erica Aisha Chavez was saying there, it's a tense moment right now. It's not exactly clear what's going to happen next. But it is reasonable to assume that the calm has ended and the storm is about to begin.
Indeed. They were marching towards the Interior Ministry. That was the destination of the protesters, and they were estimated to be a few thousand protesters. But it's a very hard push to see any women in that crowd. And
of course, what is unclear at the moment, Heather, is of course that we've got the people who are doing their sit-in protests at the Al Rabaa Mosque. We don't know what's going on with them. We don't know if they're aware of this, or if this was a breakaway faction from that group who are doing their sit-in, who are heading for the Interior Ministry. And we're not sure what the implications would be when they finally hear about this, if they're going to end their sit-in and rush onto the streets in defense of their brothers. We can see someone there burning a poster of ex-President Morsi, and we can see lots of riot police in full riot gear.
It's actually looking very ugly. Well, to the business news now, and our economics and business editor Michael Wilson is here.
Thanks so much. The telecoms company BlackBerry could be sold after admitting it can't compete in the smartphone market. The Canadian company is considering joint ventures, partnerships or an outright sale. BlackBerry has hoped its new Q10 phone would vie with the latest iPhone and Android instruments, but the handsets had a lukewarm reception. The company, which pioneered mobile email, has set up a committee to review its options. Its assets include a business that powers its messaging system and a collection of patents. It now needs to decide whether BlackBerry is more valuable as a whole or as the sum of its parts. Manoj Ladwa is head of trading at investment and consultant firm TJM Partners. He says BlackBerry is probably better broken up.
BlackBerry has a fantastic email system. Its messages are absolutely brilliant, but it hasn't been able to keep up with the rise of the iPhone. Since the iPhone came into the market in 2007 and the subsequent rise of the Android phones as well, BlackBerry's share price has dropped from those dizzying heights over $100 down to where it is at the moment, and it hasn't been able to keep up with the rest of the market. It's an also-ran in the smartphone in the smartphone area, so it's probably best broken up, and someone looking at the individual components and taking what's valuable for them and shipping out the rest to the others.
Mexico's president has announced plans to change the country's constitution to allow foreign investors into its energy sector. For the first time in 75 years, Enrique Peña Nieto wants to loosen the grip of the state-owned company Pemex and invite in large internationals like ExxonMobil and Royal Dutch Shell. It could bring billions of dollars in investment into Mexico from oil majors struggling to find new resources elsewhere. Letters to the sub-Saharan markets then. African stocks generally quiet. General sustained confidence in the Ghana stock market after second quarter results turned out better than expected. South Africa's rand is struggling against the dollar as investors anticipate upbeat US retail sales. Any sign the US economy is getting stronger is seen as supporting the withdrawal of the Fed's stimulus, which could in turn, as these things actually work out, to put pressure on the rand. The Ghana shilling is seen as weakening further due to strong demand for the dollar. The Kenya shilling looking to appreciate slightly, and as we said yesterday, the naira probably set to weaken a little again due to strong demand for the dollar. Commodities, West Texas Intermediate crude gained for a second day amid speculation that US stockpiles fell, and of course that Middle East unrest that Heather and Charles have been talking about, that'll curb the region's exports. Copper rose in London, heading for the highest close since June on thoughts that economies are rebounding in the US, the second biggest consumer of the metal, and the euro area. Of course, gold traded below the highest price in almost 3 weeks in London on speculation that some investors may sell the metal. This is what happens after prices rallied on the stronger physical demand. Silver advanced to the highest since June. So what's going to happen then to Canada's national product? I mean, it's a national icon, the BlackBerry.
I know.
Should have called it the Maple, shouldn't they?
They should have.
I've got a BlackBerry.
You see, now I was going to ask, what kind of people have BlackBerries? If you're cutting edge...
That kind of person has a BlackBerry.
I was going to say, maybe I shouldn't have said that I have a
Well, no, but I think, if I may say so, you are part of the problem that they have in the nicest possible way.
Sure.
You're a thinking, intelligent man, right? And that's the kind of market that BlackBerry want. Unfortunately, most people want fancy...
gizmos.
What kind of phone have you got?
I've got a Samsung.
Well, actually, I'm thinking of switching to Samsung, so I'm on the borderline, sort of the fringe.
Just before the lawyers step in.
And,
No, I think really they've got a long way to go, and it is an iconic brand for Canada. I think a private equity firm will come in, but they've got a long way to go. People want to be excited by upgrades. That's the thing.
That's true.
Don't they?
Exactly.
They're not with a BlackBerry.
Yeah.
Now, that's business for now. Still to come. Can the supersonic train take the strain from San Francisco to LA? Is there a song there somewhere?
It sounds like it, doesn't it?
See you later.
You're watching the Arise News Hour. Now, Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta has been elected president of Mali after beating his rival Soumaïla Cissé in a runoff vote. He will now have control of an estimated $4 billion worth of Western aid to spend on rebuilding the country. Arise News' Harry Alsop reports.
Huge tasks lie ahead for Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, or IBK as he's known, after his rival Soumaïla Cissé handed him victory in the presidential election. Cissé, who comes from the north, gave up after it became clear that Keïta had beaten him even in Gao, the largest town in the north.
It is a joy to be here tonight, and as I've always said, I'm a Republican. President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta has won this election gracefully. It is my duty to congratulate him.
This, I believe, is the symbol of the new Mali. Of a Mali now confident of its success, following the line that the voters have wished for, have wanted. I said yesterday that it is Mali that has won, and it is Mali that has won this evening.
The new president will now have $4 billion in international aid to help rebuild Mali. But he must also overhaul the armed forces, tackle corruption, and, most crucially, negotiate peace with the Tuareg fighters clamouring for more autonomy. Keita had been widely expected to clinch Sunday's runoff after claiming more than double Cissé's share of the vote in the first round and the endorsement of most of the other candidates. He served as Prime Minister during the 90s, and it was his reputation for strong leadership, along with his pledge to restore Mali's national pride, that attracted the voters. After the first round, Cissé complained of widespread fraud after more than 400,000 ballots were declared spoiled. But foreign observers praised the elections and said that people could vote without hindrance in 99% of the polling stations they visited.
I think that this election, from a democratic standards point of view, is a success. It is an election that now allows Mali to start finishing the process that it has begun, to return to a normal democracy. It permits them to truly address not only the economic problems, but at the same time, the internal political problems of this country.
Mali has suffered a year of unrest, including a military coup and a French military intervention to oust Islamist rebels from the north. A 12,000-strong United Nations force is currently being deployed as France begins to withdraw its 3,000 troops. IBK will have an unprecedented chance to rebuild Mali, but first, the former strongman must fulfill his pledge to unite the country's diverse factions. Harry Alsop, Arise News.
Well, let's talk to African risk analysis expert Lydia Boka, who's in Lille, France. Thank you very much indeed for talking to us. Are you surprised that the elections were tied up so neatly and quickly with very little controversy?
Not at all. I think France influenced the process because it so much wants to get out of Mali after being involved for over a year now. So I'm not surprised at the result.
Right. Your line's not brilliant there, but I'm going to ask you this. They've been successful, they've had successful elections now, but Mali remains a very divided country. How much of a challenge is this going to be for the new president-elect?
This is the biggest challenge because although the Tuareg account for only 10% of the population, we've seen what they can do in the north, and they've been really adamant about autonomy. So that is going to be the first challenge that IBK would have to meet, in addition to security and containing jihadists coming from
Right. They've been trying to settle this Tuareg issue for decades, but the wrangling seems to be endless. Is the president-elect likely to grant the Tuaregs more autonomy, or is he going to attempt to knit them ever tighter into Mali's national fabric?
I think he has no choice but to give them a little bit more autonomy. As you said, this has been going on for decades, and a lot of mistakes were made in the past, like supporting one tribe, not against another, but making some of the Tuaregs more powerful. And as a result, they engaged into illicit activities and then added to that political demands. So IBK is very much aware of this. I trust that he will try to at least provide more autonomy and decentralization, and that donors who are providing nearly $4 billion would also make sure that it goes into that direction so that we do not see in a couple of years another rebellion.
Okay, Lydia Boka in Lille, France, thanks very much indeed for joining us.
We're going to go back to pictures from Cairo, but this time it's from inside the pro-Morsi camp. And as you can see, that it's very, very calm. And indeed, people are going about their normal business, many people carrying flags. But also, we were hearing reports that perhaps women and children were being moved out of the camps. But you can actually see there are certainly quite a few women are there. It's a completely different scene to what we saw earlier. We saw running battles in the streets where pro-Morsi supporters were actually taking to the streets and running or trying to march towards the Interior Ministry. And the scenes here are outside the Rabaa al-Adawaya Mosque, where it is very, very calm and people just going about their normal business. These are the pro-Morsi supporters. But elsewhere we have seen quite a bit of violence. Police and the army seem to have moved in with tear gas. We'll obviously keep you up to date with this story as it develops. Now you're with the Arise News Hour, and here are the top stories this evening. And the latest Boko Haram attack in northern Nigeria has left 44 people dead after the Islamic militants opened fire at a mosque on Sunday. The details of the attack in Borno State have only just emerged. A member of South Africa's National Union of Mine Workers has been shot dead at the Marikana Platinum Mine. The union is calling the incident cold-blooded murder. It comes nearly a year to the day since 34 striking miners were killed by police at the same mine. And Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta is the new president of Mali. He now faces the dual challenge of maintaining peace following the war with Islamic militants in the north and reinvigorating Mali's economy.
Also ahead on today's show, ever get that sinking feeling? Well, the residents of this Florida hotel certainly did. We'll have the full story in 10 minutes' time.
To the Middle East now, and negotiations between Israel and Palestine are due to start this week. But Jerusalem's announcement that it would build more than 1,000 new homes in the West Bank has threatened to derail the talks before they'd even begun. US Secretary of State John Kerry, the architect of the meeting, is confident they will go ahead. Arise News' Will Took reports.
It doesn't change the roadmap to peace. That was the insistence of the Israeli government after it greenlit the building of 1,200 new homes in the West Bank. Palestine warns the decision will undermine peace negotiations due to resume tomorrow in Jerusalem.
Everything is in crisis mode. The moment Israel starts moving towards more settlements and gives the settlements preferential or priority standing or rating for development and for grants and support, it means that Israel is acting as though it has already annexed the West Bank, as though it is the sovereign power.
US Secretary of State John Kerry, whose shuttle diplomacy secured the first talks in 5 years, said the latest settlement plans add extra incentive to the negotiations.
The United States of America views all of the settlements as illegitimate. That is the policy of the United States. And we have communicated that policy very clearly to our friends in Israel. And we have worked very closely with the Palestinians in order to try to make certain that everybody understands what the road forward will be like. I think what this underscores, actually, is the importance of getting to the table quickly.
The Knesset is also drawing criticism from within Israel. As a show of good faith, Jerusalem has agreed to release 26 Palestinian prisoners tomorrow. For the families of those killed by Palestinian attacks, it's a concession that should never have been made.
We are protesting to pass a message that this unjust, wrong decision to let our killers and terrorists for nothing as a gesture isn't just, and it is not respectful of the people we love that we killed.
Prime Minister was blackmailed into releasing those terrorists. We are releasing for nothing. There is no reason.
The families can appeal the decision to free the prisoners, but it's unlikely to be successful. It's expected the release and tomorrow's peace talks will go ahead as planned. Will Took, Arise News.
Now, as Jerusalem and Ramallah try to broker a deal over the disputed territories, Israel is facing new hostility in the south. Last night, a rocket was fired from the Sinai Peninsula towards Eilat. Now, it's the first time the Israeli resort town has been targeted. The rocket was intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome missile defense system. Extra Iron Dome batteries like these have been posted along the border with Egypt to counter the rising threat posed by Islamic extremists in the wake of Mohamed Morsi's removal from power.
Well, let's take a look at some of the other news making headlines around the world. Marine biologists in America are investigating an unusually high number of dead bottlenose dolphins washing up on the East Coast. More than 120 dead animals have been discovered since June, more than 7 times the usual number. Pollution or poisonous algae are said to be amongst the most likely causes. In the northern Philippines, the cleanup operation is underway in the wake of this year's most powerful typhoon. 195-mile-an-hour winds damaged houses, destroyed crops, and left at least 2 people dead. On average, 20 typhoons strike the Philippines each year. 2 British women are facing over 20 years in jail in Peru after they were stopped at Lima airport with £1.5 million worth of cocaine hidden in their luggage. They say they were forced to traffic the drugs, which were found concealed in packets of food by sniffer dogs. Well, at least 2 buildings not far from Walt Disney World in Florida have collapsed into a sinkhole that appeared early on Monday morning. It started with cracks in the walls at the Summer Bay Resort as a sinkhole began to form beneath the structure. Over a 5-hour period from when residents were first reported something odd was happening, the building split and sank. 48 of the units have been reported as a total loss. Evacuations were successfully carried out and no injuries have been reported. There was no prior indication that the 15-year-old buildings were at any risk from this natural disaster.
It's pretty scary.
I was going to say, it would be most uncomfortable. Let's just put it mildly.
You could sell it as a new kind of Disney ride, couldn't you?
Well, you could fantasize that it's a new Disney ride. But in reality, of course, it would be totally different.
I know, where they have that train coming out of the wall at you and that. But this one has a little bit more risk involved, I think. Now, our economics and business editor, Michael Wilson, is here with more.
Thanks so much indeed. Just in, Jaguar Land Rover will recall almost 12,000 vehicles in China, its biggest market, over possible engine and oil leakage problems. That's according to China's quality watchdog. The recall comes a week after BMW said it would recall 143,000 vehicles in China. They're the latest world brands to experience difficulties in selling in the world's second largest economy. China's official news agency recently claimed that foreign producers are reaping exorbitant profits from imported luxury cars and should face a competition investigation. European stocks gained for a 4th day as companies posted better than estimated earnings, and German investor confidence climbed. US index futures and Asian shares also were up. One highlight, E.ON rallied the most in 3 months after E.ON, that's Germany's biggest utility, posted first half profit that exceeded analyst projections. Most of the other trade is quiet with low volumes because lots of people are on holiday. UK house prices rose to the highest in almost 7 years in July as government measures to stimulate the property market boosted demand. UK inflation slowed from a 14-month high in July, led by airfares and summer discounting at clothing stores. It now stands at 2.8%, and it's likely to remain at that level for some months. Looking ahead slightly, a majority of economists think that unemployment will hit the new Governor of the Bank of England's 7% threshold faster than the bank itself had forecast, which will prompt policymakers to assess whether they need to raise interest rates sooner rather than later. What do you get when you cross Concorde, an air hockey table and a rail gun? And according to a South African-born American entrepreneur, you get Hyperloop, a faster, cheaper and more convenient way to travel. It hasn't been built yet, but the aim is to connect cities in minutes. PayPal and SpaceX founder Elon Musk is behind it, and he's expected to release more details later. Daniel Henry reports.
6 hours by car, 1 hour by plane, or just 30 minutes by Hyperloop. Travelling between cities like San Francisco and Los Angeles could get a supersonic shot in the arm if Elon Musk gets his way. The billionaire entrepreneur wants to change the way we commute. Musk says that 800-mile-an-hour capsules could carry 28 passengers at a time, with a new pod launching every 30 seconds. Costing around $6 billion to build, early projections suggest that ticket prices could be as little as $20. There's a long way to go though. Even Musk says these plans are extremely speculative. A prototype would take at least 4 years to build. And with Musk trying to create the first human community on Mars, he doesn't have time to develop Hyperloop right now. Instead, he shared his plans in this blog post, challenging inventors and investors to build and better on his plans. Daniel Henry, Arise News.
All aboard. It's the sport. Here's Lance.
Thanks, Mikey. Now, a special moment tonight for Eric Abidal. He's back into the French national side. He's been called up after having a liver transplant. The 33-year-old last played for France in February 2012. Manchester City midfielder Samir Nasri is also part of the team that will face Belgium tonight. Ivory Coast is celebrating its first sprint medal at the World Championships. Moriel Ahure grabbed silver in the women's 100-metre final in Moscow, finishing just in front of America's Carmelita Jeter. Jamaica's Shelly Ann Fraser-Price won the race in 10.71 seconds. Welsh star Gareth Bale will not play for Wales against Ireland tomorrow night. The Tottenham midfielder is still injured. That's after he picked up a knock on his foot in a pre-season friendly last month. A dramatic and barely believable evening session in which 9 wickets fell ended in fading light in Durham will go down in history as the day England sent Australian cricket packing in the most dramatic fashion. Australia looked to be cruising to victory until England's Stuart Broad produced the greatest bowling spell of his career, taking 11 wickets for 121 runs, ripping right through the heart of the Australian batting lineup.
Brilliant, bullish, breathless, Broad. The smiles on the England cricketers were broad last night, but the biggest smile in Britain belonged to that of Stuart Broad. England's hero said that a pep talk with fellow bowler Tim Bresnan paved the way for the home team's thrilling 74-run victory.
At the start of that little period, Brezzy and I sort of got together. I was feeling mid-off and we said, come on, right, me and you can really put a squeeze on here. Let's build some pressure. You don't think about wickets, you just think about trying to bowl dots and trying to build pressure that way. And with that, we created chances.
Toward the end of the day, Australia seemed in cruise control, but the turnaround led by Broad left his captain lost for words.
Look, it was a fine spell of bowling. That's probably not the right adjective either at all, but you can use your journalistic license to describe it, I'm sure you would, but just knowing as a captain and knowing how important that session was, if we lost that session, we would have been struggling, and I think Broady knew that, the lads knew that, and he really charged in.
Australia have been berated back home, called the worst side in Australian history, and just when they thought they had a win, it was taken away from them in the most horrific way.
The most difficult thing is that our preparation and training has been outstanding. The boys are working their backsides off, so I can't ask for anything more of the players in regards to preparation. At the moment, we're being outplayed.
The Ashes were over last week in Manchester, and now at Chesterley Street, England have won the series. The next test at the Oval is a chance for Australia to salvage some pride. But this ruthless home side aren't in any mood for generosity.
Now, as the world knows, Australians are the most generous of people, aren't they? And especially when you beat them at sport, they're so nice, aren't they?
Yeah, they're so encouraging towards the team. Really get behind them.
No. Absolutely,
absolutely
they are.
Not. They are brutal.
So they're brutal. So the press is not beating up Australia, also beating up Mr. Broad.
Yeah, well, firstly, we'll take a look at what they have to say about their own team, first of all. So here we are. Warner punches as others collapse. So even though he did very well, still handing him for hitting Joe Root. No hiding from abject failure. That's from the Sydney Morning Herald. And just absolutely ripping into their Aussie players. We surrender, as one of the other headlines. The Aussies have completely given up.
Gracious in defeat, then. How did they...
And they forgot how to win. That's why they've lost.
Oh, that'll be it then.
So, anyway,
so what do they think about Mr. Broad then? What did they say about him?
Well, in England here, we're all full of praise for Broad.
Yeah.
No English cricketer's done this in an Ashes series since Phil Tufnell in 1997. It was phenomenal what he did yesterday. Australia on the verge of victory. They were just, all they needed 100 onwards, 9 wickets in hand, and they fell. So here's what some of the papers in Australia have been saying about Broad.
Yeah, go on.
Not as good as we thought.
Yeah, keep the swear words out.
Stuart Broad is no doubt looking forward to coming to Australia this year, and we can only wish him a safe tour. Australian crowds will enjoy having him. So obviously referring to, that they're going to really give him some stick.
Yeah.
In another, they said this summer he's mostly caused more threat to resolutions about fair play than to Australian batsmen.
Yes.
And the last one said he spent more time than the third umpire slowing the game down. So really, not full of praise of Broad. Now, they're obviously referring to when he nicked it and he didn't walk and he stayed in. Another time when Shane Warne from the commentary box criticised him for, falling down with injuries and really slowing things down. They don't like him at all, not one little bit. But in another paper, they said, would you like Stuart Broad to be injured? And all of them said no. They can't wait to get revenge.
I bet, well, indeed so. I wonder if they will. But will England turn up at any more matches then, do you reckon?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think because the next one, the Oval, they've got nothing to play for. They've won this series. Perhaps try a few new players? I don't think so. Not with Andy Flower at lead. Right. He said no. You've got to remember, they're number 3 in the world at the moment, chasing about. They just need India and South Africa above them. Yeah, sure. They're ruthless. They don't want to give these Aussies absolutely anything.
What's your best memory of it so far? Is it Broady yesterday?
I think so. It's got to be, hasn't it? I mean, it's got everybody talking about it. People who didn't even like cricket have never seen anything quite like this before. I mean, people were coming to the office to this morning saying that they only saw it at the news last night because it was such a sort of nothing of a game yesterday. You just expected Australia to cruise through, and Broady comes in firing and takes all of the Australian batsmen out.
Finally, let's leave them with a bit of footy, can we?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we've got the latest news in Samuel Eto'o, if you remember him. He went to play for a Russian side for £300,000 a week. There's some salary. He's one of the most highest paid players in the world. The club he's playing for have run out of money. So they need to offload some of these big stars. Samuel Eto'o wants to go to Chelsea. He's talked about it before. He's played under Jose Mourinho before. He described Jose Mourinho. He said he's played under plenty of coaches, but there's only one, and it's the special one. So he's in talks with Chelsea. What a signing that would be for Africa's most famous footballer playing at Chelsea.
Isn't it interesting now we've got all these expensive players who might, a couple of weeks ago, have been thought to be... They're now beached, aren't they?
Yeah.
Rooney and the rest.
Nothing's happening.
Nothing's happened. Dressing room doesn't like them. The managers don't like them. I mean, it's crazy, isn't it?
It's
some of the world's best footballers are effectively going to be doing nothing.
Yeah, it's a horrible situation. I mean, we're going to see Rooney in action tomorrow night for England against Scotland. The whole of Britain's kind of really looking forward to see how he plays there. Now, we heard at training he was a monster. He wasn't his usual self. He was actually ripping through defences. He's got a point to prove, and I reckon we're going to see that against Scotland tomorrow night.
Lance, thanks very much indeed. Charles and Heather, great football season in store. I know Heather is a particular favourite of football.
Yes, I am. Totally looking forward to it.
Same here.
Yes, I know. Anyway, finally, now in Taiwan, a giant panda cub has met its mother for the first time since its birth a month ago. Yuan Zai was born on the 6th of July, but after sustaining a leg injury, had to be incubated and kept away from her mother. But in a highly charged reunion, the mother panda is seen picking up her cub and embracing it, as zoo workers looked on in anticipation. Now, according to the caretaking staff, the giant panda's behaviour is a sure sign that she will take to motherhood with ease when Yuan Zai is finally put back in her care full-time. That is very sweet.
Yeah, this is a lovely...
Even your hard heart will crack at that.
I like that. I have a very soft heart, actually.
I know you do. I know. Anyway, give us a recap.
Yeah, just a recap of that breaking news story that we mentioned earlier. In Egypt, clashes broke out in central Cairo when supporters of ousted President Mohamed Morsi came under attack as they marched to the Interior Ministry. Supporters of the new military-installed government threw stones at the marchers and threw bottles at them from balconies. Police also fired tear gas against the protesters, and we saw pictures earlier showing the protesters running away and some of them fighting back.
And indeed, these were the latest pictures that we saw. And what was actually notably absent from those crowds were women and children who had been told to move away from this. But it looked as though it was turning pretty ugly. By contrast, what was quite interesting, we also saw pictures inside the pro-Morsi camps just outside the mosque there, and people were just going about their business in a very quiet and calm manner.
Absolutely. I think it's not clear whether or not what level of communication there is between people, where we're seeing these pictures, and people at the Morsi camps. The sit-in front of the Al-Rabaa Mosque. But clearly they didn't seem to be overtly perturbed.
Yes, we also had reports that 2 people with machetes were going into the pro-Morsi supporters, which is a pretty frightening escalation of what is going on. But the police are obviously trying to keep a lid on it, and as you can see, that picture of President Morsi, which subsequently was burnt. So we will obviously keep you up to date on all the breaking news that is coming out of Cairo and out of Egypt, and please do stay with us.
Of course, our very reliable Erica Aisha Chavez will be back tomorrow morning to discuss some of these issues taking place in Cairo now.
Contact us anytime online. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.